lot is still going on in the world. I believe that our good friend Steve Rao is still up there in New York, and I believe he returns tomorrow, if my memory is serving me correctly, and all of that. But definitely still a lot going on in the world and a lot that we can talk about. And of course, I've got two great folks here with me, and Sasha may be joining me in a little bit, but we definitely have Chris Gecko and Nick Palveda in the house as well. But one of the things that I saw in the news was that Russia's false accusations that Kiev has biological and chemical weapons illustrates that Russian President Vladimir Putin is considering using them himself in his war against the Ukraine. That, according to our president, Joe Biden. And he said that on Monday, but apparently he wasn't citing any specific evidence and all along those lines. But I do know a lot of people are concerned about either a biological or a chemical war taking place, just like there are a lot of folks that are very much concerned about the nuclear war as well. Putin's back is against the wall, and now he's talking about new false flags he's setting up, including asserting that we in America have biological as well as chemical weapons in Europe. Simply not true, Biden said at a business roundtable event. They are also suggesting that Ukraine has biological and chemical weapons in Ukraine. That's a clear sign he's considering using both of those. The Russian embassy in Washington did not immediately respond to a request for comment and all along those lines. Like I said, I'm going to bring along Chris Gecko because he's a expert in military things and all of that. But what do you think about this whole notion of chemical weapons and even biological weapons being used in this war as well? I know that anytime that wars come out, people are oftentimes concerned about that, particularly since all the way back to definitely the Vietnam War when Agent Orange was a big issue, and definitely even sometime before that when there's been chemical and other types of biological weapons. People are always kind of concerned about that. And if you listen to some people when they talk about what some folks in the literature world and even in the news world call doomsday scenarios, that is oftentimes one of the things that they point out to. In addition to the nuclear possibilities, they do point out to many of us perishing because of things that might be done either in our chemical or biology and all of that. Because I remember that even being an issue when COVID first came out. Because I do remember people talking about what might have happened to our bodies even with the vaccines and all along those lines. So there have even been some conspiracy theories. You know, you gotta love those folks that have theorized about what could be happening in the sense of biological warfare. You were a military person, Chris. Is there any kind of credence to folks when they are worried about chemical and biological weapons, whether they're thinking about it even in the sense of the pandemic or in the sense of this war in the Ukraine?
I used to get Military History magazine, which I don't even know if it's still published or not. Really, really good magazine. And in it, it would go on different historical aspects. The first instance of biological warfare being conducted was the ancient Egyptians. And what they did was they had ticks. They had these ticks that they knew carried a disease. And they would have agents go up to the front lines of the enemies, and they would release these ticks in their camps. And before you knew it, there was all these enemy soldiers were suffering from very, very, very serious illness. And because when you suffer from illness, you can't fight, all of a sudden you debilitated 25, 50% of your military. Now you have an issue. So biological warfare has been used way before, any type of type of areas. And it's, I know, isn't that just, when I read that, it was like, what?
Release the ticks, and I do
release the ticks.
So I do remember hearing people releasing, I think, snakes and other things in ancient times, and releasing all kinds of other
Agent Orange was originally a defoliant, right? So you released the Agent Orange, and that was a defoliant. You basically got rid of the jungle undercurrent, right? So you could move your troops, and you wouldn't have to worry about the jungle overhang to be able to hide snipers and the rest of that stuff. Of course, and this is just, I don't know if this is apocryphal or not, but Roundup was evidently part of that industrial use of Agent Orange. a toned down version of that. But even that has ended up with some serious issues with, cancer and those types of things.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
they're trying to fight those areas.
yeah. I
But
mean,
that is,
there are some people that if you listen to them, they would claim that if we look at the ingredients, and I'm actually looking around in my apartment and seeing that there's a can of Jif and who knows what else might be in the house and everything, but that if we looked in some of the ingredients of even some of our
well,
more modern foods, we might not want to be eating them because of some of the chemicals that are
sure,
already existed in
sure.
our food supply and all of
For
that.
preservatives and everything else, sodium benzoate and the rest of that. But the bottom line on this whole thing, and I think you're right. Basically, I was thinking about this seriously. I mean, I think about this stuff at night, and I'm going through these research areas. And when Saddam Hussein, when originally Colin Powell brought in all this data that was done by intelligence people about the weapons of mass destruction, basically everything was circumstantial. Like, okay, there are railroad cars, and there are manufacturing plants, and there are this and that, and this and that, and this and that. Therefore, he must have chemical weapons. And that's, and that's where, hey, he's got weapons of mass destruction. This is where we got to go in, and we got to get rid of that stuff so that situation, doesn't exist. And the same thing occurs. I suddenly thought, if I were the intelligence people of Ukraine, I would fight everything that Russians said with something else. Like if they said, oh, Ukraine has chemical weapons, I would counter that with saying, it's not that we have chemical weapons. We have the antidotes to the chemical weapons. So we have any chemical weapon you got. Guess what? We've hacked into your systems, and we know exactly what chemical weapon you have, and we've developed antidotes for those chemical weapons. In other words, fight white intelligence with white intelligence. I would throw that out, and then I would have other countries confirm that, right? And all of a sudden now Russia's sitting back going, wait a minute, if we use chemical weapons, they're not going to be effective.
Right.
I would say, and if it's hypersonic thing, I'd sit there and say, oh, we got from the US or whatever else, we have countermeasures to these hypersonic missiles. Go ahead and use them if you've even used them before. But if you plan on using them, this is, we have the counters all set to go, and they're going to give us the countermeasures and all that stuff. And we're going to put up barrage balloons or whatever it is. Hey, yeah, come on down with your jets and have their wings torn off. Hey, it's okay with us. Just, I would make it seem, and then I would sit there and say, oh, we're getting this stuff because we have Russian insiders sitting next to you, Putin, and they are feeding us information. Somebody's feeding us information. And I would just, I would make Putin even more paranoid than he already is. That's what I would have done with Saddam Hussein. I would have said, hey, Saddam, we got people in there. Even if it probably did not at that point in time. Although I have a good friend of mine who is actually in there. But basically, I throw stuff in there, and all of a sudden, Putin be killing off all his generals himself. He'd be sitting there saying, oh, I don't know who's loyal or who's not. Best Twilight Zone ever is The Mirror. If you want to see a really, really good old Twilight Zone from 1960s, Peter Falk plays this nutsy leader who takes over like a Cuba, like Fidel Castro. And The Mirror shows all his enemies. Well, pretty soon he starts killing people like all over the place because this mirror keeps showing him these enemies, and it's really in his head. And that's what Putin has right now. He's got in here all these enemies of his regime, of his empire, and he'll start killing people off. Watch, all of a sudden people start disappearing, not going to the gulag. They're not going to Siberia. They're going to be shot in the head. Saddam Hussein once had a general. This is a true story. Once had a general, and he was saying something. The general said, well, imperial president or whatever he was, I don't agree with that. I think we ought to, just do it this way. And he said, that's what I like. People who disagree with me. And he got up, he went over, he took the guy on his arm, and he took his gun out of his holster and shot him right there in the conference room in the head. And he goes, are there any other questions?
No question. No further questions, Your Honor.
That was it.
Attorney Nick, I don't think there are any questions after that, but I do want to hear from Sasha. I'm glad that Sasha has made it here to talk about what's going on in the Ukraine and Russia and everything. But I know that on past editions of this show, you have talked about another incident of biological warfare that might have been unintentional, but it definitely happened, and it pretty much eradicated entire nations, because we can't say just eradicated one nation, because the Native American population is actually multiple nations and all of that. But definitely when the lands were conquered in the first time by some of the European countries, and you've even brought this up on some past shows, they did bring certain diseases and wiped out entire populations. So that might have been done unintentionally, but it did wipe out entire population. So I was wondering what your thoughts are about this use of biological and chemical warfare. And that's actually the question I was going to ask Sasha eventually, is also whether he's worried about that in his homeland, because they are saying that that could be the next line of what the military of Russia tries. But Nick, what are your thoughts about chemical and biological warfare?
I think that Zelensky should be doing a special operation in Moscow, or considering it. Okay, because the thing is, one way to stop a bully is to bully back.
Right.
He's got an air force. Okay, and he goes, you know what? We should do a special operation in Moscow and drop some bombs in Moscow, and see if it can stir up the hornet's nest, and say, really, we're just going after military targets in Moscow, and see what happens next. I mean, the thing is, hey, why not? Well, why not a special operation in Moscow and knock out some military installation? Remember, they do have an air force. Airplanes, as Chris knows, can take off and head in a direction toward Moscow to engage in a quote special operation to knock out some of the military in Moscow. I just don't believe in this Putin bully stuff. Because bullies don't go back until they get bullied back. Sorry, it is what it is. So and of course this goes to, look, if you're a true road warrior, real road warrior, that's what you would do. I mean, the thing is, it's special operation in Moscow, baby. And then the thing is, if they happen to hit some civilian targets by mistake, which could happen, then the thing is, the people in Moscow who haven't tasted war in that generation, because remember, World War II is, most of the people there are dead, will now start experiencing what the people in Ukraine are experiencing. But I'd like to hear Sasha's thoughts, because
Yeah, I'd like to hear Sasha's thoughts as well.
You just live in that crazy part of the world.
I think that right now we already see the beginning of a third world war, and it's kind of a very calculating move on the West and US to have Ukraine by itself holding the back and fighting this war with the most evil countries of, I would say, all time. I just recently heard the sermon of the head of the Russian Orthodox Church.
Mm-hmm.
And what he was talking about is that finally the justice is prevailing. Finally, we will put everybody in place. So next will be Moldova, and then Baltic republics, and everybody else will join back to Russia by themselves. So this is not just Putin's idea. In fact, they're making through Russian society, through propaganda, through even head of Russian Orthodox Church. So this is all society. Some of that was forced. Some of them are doing that willingly and enjoy every moment of it. And that cancer has to be absolutely eradicated. And I think Ukraine is doing a very capable job, but it's not enough. I think everybody has to join them, and at least if you can't fight or you don't know how to fight, okay, at least cut absolutely all Russian participation in the world economy, finance, sport, culture, everywhere. Just cut them, just put them in complete 100% isolation. And as I said yesterday, if Germans are scared to be cold during the winter, again they can do some really just buy this electric heaters and so on, and just help themselves if it's really so cold there, but stop using Russian oil and gas. Period.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Speaking of which, I saw an article that I was reading that actually covered two of your great passions. Definitely the country of Ukraine, and I know that you're definitely supporting their efforts to fight back Russia, and rightfully so, and all of that. But there is also a city there, the city of Lviv, that apparently is Ukraine's capital of chess. And there was an article that I was reading where they were actually making a point to keep the tradition of the local street games going despite the chill of the weather and despite the war raging more to the east of that particular city. As a matter of fact, there was one gentleman that they quoted in everything. You may know this gentleman, Alexander Gusar, who was apparently a chess player, that said that he was actually doing this to support the army because some of the money that he was winning in this chess matches, he was actually putting it into a fund to help the soldiers and all of that. He said he was putting it in a donation basket at the supermarket for the army. And I think there was another one that I have heard you mention on the show that was featured as well. So I don't know if you want to just speak to that and how some of the people are even using some of their chess winnings to help in this whole fight against Russia.
Yeah, it's quite interesting phenomenon, and I think it will help a little bit. But there are also Canadian government, unfortunately, just ended a couple of days ago as a program of matching dollar per dollar whatever you're sending to help Ukrainians. But hopefully they will resume that. They just raised much more money than they expected, but so it will continue. And so help to Ukraine is coming really big time. And I think all they need is to stay put for another maybe 7-8 days, and they will go to the counteroffensive.
You know, the funny thing is, Sasha, Sergei Karjakin, was one of the top chess players in the world, who played for the World Championship, made a statement that I found quite interesting. I back Putin no matter what. In other words, I back my government no matter what. Now, in one respect, you're very loyal, but in the United States, we have the right not to back our government. For example, I did not back that invasion of Iraq. I thought that was insane. I actually thought it dealt with George Bush getting revenge on Saddam Hussein trying to assassinate his father. And it seemed to be a logical reason to do it. But certainly it was a reason for me to switch party affiliations at that point in time. Karjakin, at first I go, well, he has the right to say and think what he wants. And certainly he has the right to say things like that. But Sasha, for a guy who's smart, purportedly smart, he's one of the top chess players in the world, that was the most stupid thing I ever heard a smart person say, was when Karjakin goes, well, I back my government no matter what. It means I have no ability to think. Is this how Russians think? I have no ability to think. I got to worship, Putin no matter what. This is absolutely insane. And they banned him from play for 6 months. He's not allowed to play. But I'm starting to agree with you that anybody who lives in Russia, purportedly, they pay taxes and they support the war either directly or indirectly. They're involved in this, And so the thing is, there's no reason for Pfizer, who's continually supporting the war by sending cancer drugs over. There's no reason for Boeing. There's no reason to support that country bloody whatsoever until they pull out of Ukraine. In other words, I would cut off the oil, cut off the drugs, cut off everything. Yeah, make it a dismal third world country, which, in other words, they don't want to be part of the world, the new world order, new economy, then fine. And you can't go back and say, well, it's America's fault. Look what they did in Iraq 20 years ago. Come on, you can't do that. You got to look at today's world, today's economy, today, the way people live, and what they're doing is absolutely wrong. And so the thing is, you just got to cut these guys off. That's it.
Well, first of all, what Russia is doing today in Ukraine doesn't have analogs in the all history of the world. Forget about America invading Iraq or so on. Forget about even Hitler. You know what Russia did now to 52 people from Mariupol, where there's absolutely incredible fight going on, comparable only to Stalingrad. I don't know
Right.
what else. They took 52 people, mostly, of course, women, children, old people, and they moved them to undisclosed location in Russia,
Yeah.
and they had to sign their papers that they're going to work for free for 3 years. So if you thought that the slavery is done and over with,
Oh no,
no,
no, it's
no,
not.
it's
No.
not true. I never believed that slavery was done and over. And here we are talking about enslaving people. Absolutely, they trying to prove they were their brothers and it's the same nation, same peoples, and they're enslaving these people. This is a tragedy.
Yeah.
It's
No,
Oh,
this is a total tragedy, and slavery has been definitely going on in modern times. I actually know some people that are involved in the fight against certain types of slavery, including child slavery and other types of slavery, including some with women, that is still very much active in the world population. It's not just certain minority populations. This can be anything from class to other reasons that people are being enslaved and the different types of slavery that exist. But yes, it is still very much a problem. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of studies around human trafficking, which is definitely a form of slavery and all of that. So definitely that is still very much going on in our world. By the way, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about this, Sasha, because I know that your opinion of the Russians, and I can definitely understand that, and definitely Ukraine being your home area. But I thought that I was under the impression that Belarus was trying to be neutral, but then I'm reading this quote from Andrei Valutin or Valakitin. I'm probably mispronouncing it, but he's a chess grandmaster, and he was saying that he wasn't going to be playing definitely against any Russian opponents, but he also wasn't going to be playing against any Belarus opponents. So I guess Belarus is taking the side of Russia, or are they being forced to take the side of Russia or Mother Russia and all of that. So I'm not
well,
sure where Belarus falls into this whole war campaign.
but don't forget that one of the fronts against Ukraine, and particularly Kiev, was coming from Belarus, and
Okay.
that's the only area where Ukrainians were not so well prepared because they could never believe that the attack could come from the territory of Belarus. This is absolutely incredible. However, I was impressed yesterday when I heard that. Schlumberger, Halliburton, and Baker Hughes, they're getting out of Russia for good. And that means in about 3 to 4 months, there will be incredible problems in the Russian oil and gas industry because these companies are serving all their rigs and all this uh, spare parts, the maintenance, everything is done by these companies. Russian don't have access now to the technology required to not even do new exploration, but even maintain what they got going.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, but I was a little bit surprised that but maybe not because they are closer to Russia, that a Finnish company was saying that it was going to continue its production in Russia to retain control of its local factories at a time when many companies, like you just said, are halting operations in Russia as part of their protests. Because apparently Finland's Nokian Tires PLSC said that it was going to continue that operation because they were saying that by continuing to operate the passenger car tire factory in Russia, we want to make sure that the factory is operated and controlled by Nokian tires also in the future. So I guess they're doing this for a method of self-production and all along those lines. Because apparently this company produced about 80% of the 20 million tires it makes a year in Russia. It makes Russian passenger car tires in Russia, while tires for heavier vehicles are made in Finland or elsewhere. And apparently their stock, that's when you do something like that, your stock will fall, but apparently it fell by 13% on yesterday. But would you be surprised at a company like this making those kind of decisions, or is it just kind of like self-preservation?
I believe there is a concept which is well known by the name Finlandization. That means the country, although remains neutral, and even now I've heard of some inspirations of Finland and also Sweden, But Sweden doesn't have border with Russia, so that's not so important. But Finland, in particularly, to join NATO. We'll see how things will develop. On the other hand, Finland is always very careful in its dealings with Russia and is trying to be not necessarily nice, but at least not to be hostile to Russia, that's for sure. And this is coming from their policy back in 1940 when they fought incredible war against Russia. They were very successful to a degree, but again, the Russian war machine was probably 100 times bigger. So eventually they had to settle for a peace. They gave up a significant part of Finland called Karelia. It became Karelia Republic in Russia. But they also never had any conflicts with Russia until today, and even today they don't have conflict. So they have no conflicts with Russia, period. But that comes at the cost of being very careful in their policies, and looks like it pays off because when you take for example, there are some measurements, for example, of happiness of different countries. Finland is always in one of the top 3 places.
Yeah,
So
they're definitely seen as a happy environment and a place to be happy. Speaking of happy and not being happy all the time, and I'd love to hear Chris's thoughts about this because it actually deals with one of his favorite topics, which is data collection and all of that. Because, and this is getting away from the war slightly, but public health workers are definitely having an issue, and there's been harassment of public health workers widespread during the pandemic, is what a recent study said. So the American Public Health Association said that, and they published it last week. The study compiled a tally of workplace harassment against healthcare professionals by combining media content and a national survey of local health departments in the United States. But this is where I got the question for you, Chris, because when I hear this figure, it doesn't really sound like that much because they were saying, if we think about how many health workers there are in the country, but they were saying that public health workers have faced at least 1,499 cases of workplace harassment stemming from the COVID-19 pandemic. And they're seeming like this is a big deal according to this news article and everything, but that's only just one under 1,500, and we've been in this pandemic for 2 years. So knowing how many healthcare workers, shucks, there are probably several thousand healthcare workers just at Duke and everything. So that doesn't really seem like that many cases. Of course, we do know a lot of times things are underreported, so 1,500 might be as much as 15,000 based on what they are saying. But I was just wondering, from a data standpoint, what is your thoughts about this? Because the rest of what the article said was during the COVID-19 pandemic and other co-occurring public health challenges, public health officials described experiencing threats and intimidation, social villainization and exclusion, and the undermining of their professional duties by poorly aligned politics and an inadequate public health infrastructure, is what the study said.
So my wife just retired from nursing about 2-3 years ago. She was in nursing for over 40 years, and so she was in nursing in the early 1970s, basically. And yeah, those are definitely underreported. I mean, she used to tell me when we were first married, she worked for Johns Hopkins University, and she used to tell me about the stuff that went on there. And I mean, doctors would make comments, they would, inappropriate touching, things like that. And it just, I'll tell you, COVID-19. So COVID-19, they're only taking into consideration basically March of 2020 until now. So when you take into consideration just 2 years, basically, and you got 1,499 reported, in that 2-year period, that's, I mean, and these are probably very serious. It gets to the point where, people put up with just so much, and then that's enough. But I mean, I had a situation. She told me a situation where once she worked with Ben Carson, which by the way, Ben Carson was just a fantastic human being in her eyes. Did a lot of, she did surgery with him. She was assisted surgery, but the way she would get back at doctors, if the doctors would like inappropriately touch her or whatever else, the next time they were in the operating room, she would hand them the instrument and would slap it in their hands. As a matter of fact, she was taught when you assist in surgery and somebody asks for an instrument, you make sure that it slaps the glove. Well, she made sure it slapped the glove really hard. And after about the third, fourth slap of that glove, all of a sudden this guy got the message. And he would look at her and he would say, "Okay, I get the message." And she goes, "Oh, really, doctor? I just want to make sure that you have the instrument in your hand." So then she would continue to do that throughout the operation. And afterwards, she said it was really funny because there would be no more inappropriate touching from that doctor, because he knew that the next time they were in that operating room, if she was the assistant, if she was assisting in that surgery, that his right hand would hurt or left hand would hurt as a result of the slapping of that instrument. And there was nothing he could do because that's the way they were taught. So
that makes me really feel comfortable.
But Nick, but that was
the nurses and the doctors are getting in fights. Why?
Well,
yeah.
Along those same lines and everything, because I was actually going to bring up part of what the harassment they were talking about was media harassment, because part of what they were saying, yes, there was some of that kind of harassment that Chris is alluding to, but the rest of the article was talking about some of the things that you've brought up on this network for the last couple of years, which is the way that people will basically take some of these theories and take it out on the people that are bringing the facts to them. Because one of the people was saying that I was trashed on Facebook like every day. My kids were accosted at school. They would get emails about the fact that their dad was shutting down restaurants and requiring masks. A doctor practicing in the Western U.S. told the researchers. So, people talk to my kids. My wife was accosted at the grocery store. I know one county health officer south of me who ended up with a death threat. And so it surprised the amount of anger that came out over this. They'll still buckle your seatbelt. They'll put their tray tables up when they're on the airplane. They'll give their kids an MMR shot before they go into the 6th grade. And all of a sudden, the mask becomes this huge invasion of their private liberty. And so that was surprising. Is what this person
but Mark, I worked for Social Security, and I worked in a field office for a little while. And let me tell you something: those people that work in Social Security field offices or IRS operators or people like that, man, let me tell you something. You talk about death threats. There was a person called up our office and said, "I'm going to kill every one of you. I'm going to come in. I'm going to shoot you." And it's like,
that doesn't sound very friendly.
Well, the thing is, and it's a federal crime, right? So it's like,
minor problem.
And I'm sitting back, and at first I was like, oh my God. But after about you get to third, fourth one, it's like, okay, call the Federal Protective Service, have them come in, do an investigation, find out what's going on, trace the call if you can. But so after a while, it just gets to that point where, like, if you're gonna come in and shoot me, have at it. We have armed guards. You're going to end up going not to jail for a long time. You're going to end up on a death penalty. I mean, it's fine if you want to have at it. And these people, and it was all about, like, you didn't give me enough in my check, or you
shorted me $30.
Right. It's unbelievably stupid stuff. And people.
But
you can't fix stupid here, Mark. You can't
fix stupid. But speaking of stupid, I heard a friend of mine who was doing some conferences and doing some online kind of events, and one of them was talking to a credit repair person, and they were actually, and this is one to hear from both Chris and Nick about this, but they were actually of the opinion that those credit repair companies are actually not really doing you any favor, that they're really doing fraudulent things, and that most of us can actually have our credit repair done fairly quickly. I want to say that they said that after 7 years, most of your credit is repaired anyway, and that there was even incidences of bank fraud if you let the credit agencies, the clean credit agencies, do what they claim they can do, and if the IRS decides to push back. So I was just wondering your thoughts about that, both of you, one in the legal field and the other being a data person. Because when I was hearing that, I was going like, hey, wait a minute. So you mean that we can actually, that this whole thing that we hear all the time on TV about, get this company or that company, they're going to clean your credit, is really a fallacy?
This is both from a data and from a cybersecurity point of view. I never understood the concept, and maybe you guys can, anybody on this panel can tell me, why would I give something like LifeLock? Why would I give them, right, my birthday, my social security number, my mother's maiden name? Why would I give it to them to protect it? Because if they get hacked, they get it. They get it anyway. I never understood Same thing with title lock and the rest of it. I'm going to give them my information, PII, right? Personally identifiable information, so that they can protect it. Why don't I just protect it? I never, and same thing with credit repair and everything else. I'm going to give them my bank account numbers.
No.
I'm going to give them all that. It's like, I don't understand. And why do people have user IDs that are their account numbers? I never understood that. Why would you do that?
Well, part of the problem, Chris, is again our education system. And this is a failure of our education system, K through 12. Not only are we not even the top 25 under the PISA scores, the PISA scores, which are your basic assessments,
right?
The United States of America in the top 25, but our education is still so far behind the 8 ball. Everything that you discussed relating to credit, data, protection, and all this stuff is not being taught to our kids in college, high school, or elementary school.
Which raises the question.
A big failure of our education system. They're not teaching what people need to know today. They're teaching really things that you needed to know in 1880. In 1880, American history is great to spend a year with. Today, spending things on what you're discussing is what people need to know if they're going to survive in the 21st century. So I just think that we're so far behind. Now, speaking of data, I know you did a lot of research on COVID-19. I'm still playing. I only play with one number, death, because if you get sick, I really don't care. But if I catch something, I die. If I catch something, I die. I start caring a little bit.
Sasha, did you hear that?
Okay, right. Okay, so the thing is, my question on this. Okay, so I pulled today's data. Today's data, the death rate was in the United States, and we'll show it to everybody. It's not being reported on the news because the news doesn't want to report anything that is interesting. Here's your death toll today in the United States, 1886. But then when you do this, and I know you don't like to annualize on a linear basis, but let's say I do, because that's how people get into financial trouble. They always say this is only $50 a month. They don't say it's $600 a year or $1,200 a year. So I always like to annualize it times 365. Here's the amount of people that will die this year if we keep this rate up. Now look at this number. Okay. I know you don't like.
Sorry.
I know you don't like to do this. But here's the amount of people that will die in the United States: 688,390. Okay, now here's what the media's report on today. Let's talk about Kajoni Brown being appointed Supreme Court. She will get appointed. She's being nominated. Her dad went to the University of Miami Law School like I did. Go you. Okay, so she's going to get it. So it's just a waste of time. So it's all political. But this is not a waste of time. This affects everybody who's listening to this today. 688,000. This is the United States. I don't know about the rest of the world.
Yeah, that's just the United States.
This is just the United States. These are dead people. These are more people that are going to probably die in Ukraine, will die in the United States of COVID-19, unless we really take this seriously, which is one reason I still wear masks. I still don't socially spend a lot of time with people, although we're going to get together on Thursday. My bad. Okay, my bad. Okay.
But hold on a second. Speaking of socially getting together and everything, I'm actually going to tie the two.
People, dude, this is a lot. The only saving grace on this, there's one saving grace.
What's the saving grace?
Most of these are old people, and they go off our Social Security rolls. Think about it. In other words, they're about to get Social Security or on Social Security, and they're sucking money out of the Social Security Trust Fund, and now they're dead.
Well, the spouse will get it.
Security. Well, their spouse might have their own Social Security. So,
no, but we can actually tie the two issues together and everything, because actually I'm sure that because I'm just sure that that's the way that dictators think, that sometimes Putin might have been thinking about a major target that he would hit and everything. So maybe he was thinking like, if he wanted to hit the U.S., hit the Super Bowl or hit the Oscars, which are coming up very shortly and everything of that nature. But maybe he was even thinking, Sasha, I don't know what you think about this, but maybe he was thinking about hitting Miami, because that is where the spring break crowd goes and all of that. Unfortunately, they have declared a state of emergency because they are concerned about some shootings that happened over the weekend, similar to what happened in New York. So now they are pulling back. So if he was planning to hit hundreds of thousands of young people there in Miami, it might not be hundreds of thousands. It might only be tens of thousands.
Chris had a report to help apologize and make me feel better about the 688,000. And for weeks, we have not allowed him to do the report because we've had on special guests, like people running for U.S. Congress.
No, that's
Yeah, I
good.
definitely want to
And
hear
I'm
that
okay with
report.
that.
I need to hear this
and people
report,
from
and I want to
Ukraine.
know what our
I
thoughts
want
are
him
about
to make me
this.
feel better that this is not
No,
real.
I'll make you feel
this
better.
disappear from
Let me make
Thank
you feel better this way. Okay. I just did a quick 1886, right? Is what you put down as people that have died, right? In the United States.
today,
Correct? Today.
yesterday.
So yesterday. All right. So yesterday. So that's that's one day, 24 hours, 86,400 seconds, correct? So that means you have a death every 50 seconds, every 50 seconds.
Yeah.
From COVID. Do you know that for the last 20 years, you've had a death every 36 seconds from heart disease? Every 36 seconds, Nick. And nothing.
And your point is, counselor?
My point is that, hey, let's put as much effort into solving the heart disease problem as we're putting into solving the COVID-19 problem.
I won't disagree with you.
Hold on a second.
I
Wait a
won't disagree with you on the heart disease.
And I want to.
Okay, but this is stop it, Mark. This is a complete deflection.
But I want to add something to your disagreement.
Deflection. He doesn't want to talk about COVID-19. He wants to say, "Look, there's Haley's comet. Let's take a look at that." Counselor, please get back to the issue.
I'm China with Putin. Look at this over here in
Stop
Ukraine.
talking about that. Talk about what we're talking about, COVID-19. I love the Republican deflection. They do it all the time. And they do it on the internet all the time. The minute you nail them, you will never get away with it in court. The minute you nail them on an issue, they go, "Well, let's talk about the war in Iraq." Forget the war in Iraq. We're talking about this, buddy. We're talking about COVID-19. Please don't save him, Mark. Please don't save him.
Hold on a second.
Let him suffer in this.
Nick, hold on a second, because while we're deflecting from the Republican side, so you get that Chris is deflecting from the Republican side, I'm going to deflect from the other side, because the other side, and another issue that has been going on and everything, is the whole issue of gun violence. Because definitely what has happened now is that they are saying that there's a lot of gun violence, so now people are saying that they're going to pull back. Because what the mayor said of this Florida city is, I know this might be happening all over the country, as I've seen on some national reports, but frankly, that doesn't make anybody feel better right here, because this is our city and we cannot allow it to descend in this kind of chaos and disorder. So because some people were shot and killed in a random shooting, apparently they're going to shut down parts of Miami, which is popular for spring break and all of that. So Gilbert told reporters that if he could stop the influx of spring break crowds, he would. But with revelers still coming into the city, he said authorities are being pushed to impose more extreme responses, including a curfew. So they're letting them come in, but they're going to give them a curfew. And this is an attempt to push back against the reputation that Miami Beach is a 24-hour party city. By the way, I've been to Miami. Don't remember if I've been to Miami Beach. I would agree it is like a 24-hour party city.
It is a 24-hour party city. What's wrong with that? And the thing is, see, here's where Chris does have a point. I'm going to give him a little credit. Not much, because he doesn't deserve it, but a little credit, okay? Heart disease kills more people than bloody guns. It's not even close. Okay, so when he says it should be the number one issue, yeah, there's, last year, 656,000 people died of heart disease, and we don't even talk about it. It's like, well, that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to get old and die of heart disease, rather than say, it's the number one killer in the United States, far surpassing gun crimes or any other forms of deaths out there. So if you look at the data, you're looking at heart disease to be the biggest killer in the United States right now. So that's where you get your little bit of credit, Chris. Even though it was
Nick, you brought up the data. I didn't bring up the data, Nick. You brought up the data.
I did.
Can I show you the data?
We want to see the data, but we also have a comment.
That's what we've been waiting for.
We never brought up their comments, and they were actually addressing Nick. It said, Nick, you are speaking as someone who enjoys some degree of freedom of speech and our right to disagree with our government without necessarily having to worry about losing your job, being arrested, and having your family arrested. I think Americans just don't understand how personally difficult it is to speak against governments like the one in Russia and other communist countries. So
I agree.
I think Sasha understands.
I can't wait to meet you, David. Let me tell you.
2 days from now. Just calling this, hey, David, how you doing? What's that? That's a little COVID-19 spreading the love, baby.
Okay.
All right. So show me how this is over with.
So I gotta show you this because I think this is important. Okay, so let me see if I can do it. I'm just gonna show
Well,
the
you
entire.
could show us stuff that's not important. Wait, you actually did show
I'm showing you my screen. Okay.
There we go.
Yes.
There we go.
Now
Okay,
this is typical StreamYard screen, by the way.
Yeah,
people.
yeah.
Wait, this is actually working.
Okay.
Pneumonia death.
Okay, so this is pneumonia deaths, right?
Oh, brother.
Okay. You notice how it goes up and down, Nick? See how it goes up and down?
It's like the stock market. I understand going up and down.
Wait a minute. Let me show you this.
Yeah.
This is COVID-19 deaths.
Mhm.
Wow. So this is
Yeah.
So this is COVID-19 deaths. And watch. This is pneumonia death. Watch this.
And your point is, counselor.
My point is that it absolutely parallels pneumonia deaths, which means
Lord.
that pneumonia deaths and COVID-19 deaths are related. Now watch this. I'm going to show you this. This shows the forecasted. That
doesn't mean it's related just because it has the same wave function. You're not talking about the guy who has an IQ of 50.
COVID-19 deaths, pneumonia.
Wave functions wave functions that are actually running parameterid doesn't mean that they're correlated in any stretch of the imagination. Counselor,
it does mean they're correlated. It doesn't mean causation, right?
If Sasha can show you that's Tesla stock, and so you say Tesla stock is related to COVID deaths.
But you can't annualize it. You cannot annualize it like you just did.
Sure,
you can't
I can.
do that.
I just
no,
did.
You can't. You can. You can have a good time with that, but the same thing is, stock market and all the other stuff. This is the proper exponentially, right? This is how this is done. This is how you do it with 95% confidence level on both sides. And now this is the prediction based on what it is. So you're not going to get your 688,000. It's just not going to work that way.
No, that's obviously your opinion, counselor. Not taking into fact there may be a variant out there that changes the whole nature of the beast.
Well, then you're talking about
688,000
or a spike.
Okay, or a spike. Yeah. So the thing is, this is all it calls for a hypothetical, Your Honor. I'd like all his evidence dismissed.
Speaking of something that does not call for a hypothetical, and this actually comes back to one of Sasha's favorite topics and everything. I do want to come back to the Ukraine and all that. I know we got our special at 11, but I know that sometimes when Shaquille is here, he talks about the Quad countries. He talks about the countries that are like part of the alliance and all of that, being the United States, Japan, Australia, and supposedly India. But our lovely president has said that India is only the one among those that's being, in his words, somewhat shaky in acting against Russia over its invasion of Ukraine, as India is trying to balance its time with Russia and the West. And I was wondering, Sasha, what's your thoughts about this? Because they are closer to Russia, so that might be why they're being a little bit shaky on all of that. But definitely, it sounds like Biden wants them to act more in alliance with the United States and Japan and Australia. But he did say that he was not feeling that, because he was saying, in response to his aggression, we have presented a united front throughout the NATO and in the Pacific. He told a business forum on Monday, the Quad, with the possible exceptions of India, being somewhat shaky on some of these, but Japan is extremely strong. So is Australia, which I'm glad Shaquille will know in terms of dealing with Putin's aggression. But would you like to see more from India?
Yeah, sure, why not? But it's really unimportant that what's going on now in Ukraine, where people are being enslaved and killed and so on. So the opinion of India, it's valuable to a degree, I would say. Now, I missed my turn on this
Go for it.
COVID discussion.
Right.
I just wanted to add something to that, at least from Canadian perspective. As you know, Ontario, the province where I live, had probably the longest lockdown in the world. It was lasting, I think, well over a year. The cases are still there, but not significant. So provided that there will be no new variant, I think we are handling that quite well. Now, yesterday, it was complete cancellation of the masks or any restrictions on restaurants or venues. And you can see now the hockey arenas and basketball play. It's full to capacity or so. So what that means? That means that although the COVID is still there, and it's true that certain number of people will die, including Canada, including Ontario. They will just die. Let's face it. There will be nice funerals, there will be relatives, and so on. But that's a fact of life. They could die from something else. They could go into a car accident, perhaps. But no, they will die from COVID. However, what is available? There are all kind of the treatments, all kind of shots available, booster shots, just name it. You can come to, to your doctor and say, which shot would you like to be to select one? You will be given that shot in a matter of 45 seconds, period. So all protections are available to those who want them and need them. Those people who don't want and don't need and prefer to die, you cannot prevent them from their wishes. So they will die. Unfortunately, they may infect some other people on their way to the funeral services. That's quite undesirable. But listen, we have to all live with that. We have to avoid being in the cramped places, and that's the best what we can do. It's probably not the best solution, but it's the most preferred solution. And it seems to me that all people, vaccinated and non-vaccinated, they're all content with this policy. That's how it's played in Canada.
In the words of a wise man, Nick, I
Yes.
heard
No, I agree.
it
and
only
I think
takes one day to die.
right.
But I'm not going to say his name, but his initials are Sasha.
Yeah,
know?
yeah. Well, the thing is, what I see is the media retracting, and the people. It's almost like this. Let's all vote on COVID going away. Okay, it's gone away. That's what's going on. The media says, well, we don't want to talk about it anymore. In the meantime, we're on track to have 688,000 people die. But because we don't want this to happen, and we don't want to wear a mask, and we don't want to get vaccinated, and frankly, the media is tired of talking about it. Seriously. Then we're just not going to talk about it. It's all going to go away.
Hey, Nick,
Okay,
Nick,
and
but
I
I've
think
got another.
that's absolutely not true.
No, but I have another
This
question
is
not
to
how
gonna
ask
go
you.
away.
bad
Hold on a second.
I agree.
I've got
our
another question
government
to ask
are.
you really
This is
quickly
what's
about.
really going on out
No,
there.
but I have
They're
another
feeding
question to
you
ask you really
garbage.
about the whole COVID situation and everything. Because as I recall, 2 years ago, and I'm looking around and my house probably needs a little bit of a cleaning right now and everything. But as I recall from 2 years ago and everything, they talked about some very basic steps that were needed. And some of those steps, they are, like you just said, pulling back from. It was wear a mask. It was wash your hands. And I wonder how
Sure.
many people are actually
Oh,
still
but
practicing washing their hands.
I
The other one
do.
that I remember was they said to try to keep your environment as sanitary as possible. And
Yeah.
I know for a fact, coming back to something that Chris said, because I've talked to him about this offline and everything, I have a relative that just had, well, a soon to be relative. They're not quite a relative yet, but a soon to be relative that is, and definitely part of the
Oh,
family, as far as I'm concerned, about that had just had a major surgery. And I know for a fact that my brothers had to get his reports secondhand because they're only allowing like two people into the environment. Because, like I said, it was a major surgery. So even though they say that we're loosening up and everything, apparently a lot of our major hospitals still have that
that's
two
true.
rule, that two member family rule and everything, even though we're supposedly saying that things are getting better. So I guess my questions for everybody on this panel is, do you think that there are a lot of people that are probably like me that they probably need to do a little bit of mopping and other things in their house and in their work environments
Right.
and things of that nature that are not necessarily doing it? And also, we're not hearing the reports about the other two aspects of what we were supposed to be doing, which is common sense, which is washing your hands and trying to
Sure.
keep a
Yeah.
sanitary
Yeah.
environment.
But what I'm saying, Mark, is the media and the people have voted that they don't want to hear about masks. They don't want to hear about COVID anymore. Hence, COVID's gone away. Now, Chris, since your spouse is a registered nurse, like my mom was the head of nurse at Tampa General Hospital.
Oh, wow.
When Dr. Troop threw the scalpel at her, she threw the scalpel back at him. And you know what? She was always his nurse from there on in because she didn't take any of the garbage from the doctors there. And that's how she became the head nurse at TGN.
Wow.
And so I grew up with all this garbage, all these medical bugs. And and as a kid, I just liked watching some of the people and the deformities and the crazy things they had to go through. It was pretty sick. But when I'm looking at the hard data, and I would like to see what your spouse would say. Oh yeah, it's gone away. There's only 1886 that died this year. This yesterday. And by the way, this is a number that we're just going to choose to ignore because the media is tired of talking about it, and the government's tired of fighting. They're tired of fighting people on trying to get vaccines en masse. So because of those two reasons, now notice, they have nothing to do with the logic. They're just all emotional. The media is tired of talking about it. People are tired of listening to it. People are tired of wearing masks. Hence, it's gone away. Even though the numbers show, as of yesterday on a linear progression, that we're going to have 688,000 people die in the United States of COVID. But we don't want to hear that. So we're just going to ignore it. In other words, that's the name.
Well, I think I'll tell you what, Nick. Let me come back a little bit on this.
Yeah. And please don't talk about heart disease because we're talking about COVID.
If the situation exists where what you're saying is, and I agree with you, if you're saying it this way, is that it's not just COVID that we should be talking about. It's any disease that can be prevented by good hygiene. By being it, but if you're sick, if you're sneezing, if you're coughing, wear a freaking mask. Stop forking around with my life and put something on your face to keep those germs down. Wash your hands, idiot. Wash, after you touch, after you're in church of all things. If you're touching the pew, do whatever. Just spray your hands. If you're gonna touch other things, spray your hands. Hey, or wash your hands. Wash your hands when you can. If you do that, then it's not just COVID you're going to eliminate or reduce or mitigate.
Be other diseases.
No, there's no doubt about that. You would do that. But the other thing that you just said, which is very much true, is that probably one of the greatest, and I hate to put it this way, but one of the greatest benefits of the whole COVID situation was that it forced more people to actually, particularly in the last couple of years and last couple of months, it's becoming less so now, but it forced more people to actually stay at home when they were sick. Do you know how many times when I was working in an office, there would be people that were plainly sick, plainly had a cold, plainly had a flu, but they were afraid of what Sasha has alluded to, which is that they didn't have enough money to survive. So they went to work, even though they knew that they were sick and all of that. But in this particular case, what they would do is, because the work is at home, they would wind up staying at home and keep those bugs, whatever those bugs are, in their own environment. So in that case, some of this hybrid environment has been a blessing in disguise, to use that kind of term and everything, because it's actually made more people stay at home. Because I can tell you, I've worked at a couple of corporations, and there was a couple of folks that I knew were plainly sick, and they were not trying to stay away from the job because they needed the money.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And the thing is, what I'm saying with is, like Yogi Berra says, it ain't over till it's over. And I want Chris to tell me, hey, look, I've seen the data. We're seeing 0,000. It's over. Nick, you're free to go around the world, et cetera, and keep traveling. Go on vacation.
I'll never say that.
Well, the thing is, then you're gonna be on the TV for a long time, because I'm gonna wait till you say that. Okay,
that's not happening.
So with that, I think we have to go because
we do, because y'all got to bounce over to Sasha's side. Y'all have already got the link. I think
you're the highest rated show on the network,
and I think Chris is doing the interview. But don't give me the line, because I never got any email about what the details were.
I don't think I had the link. So
what?
Whatever.
You don't have the link?
Yeah,
I'll send it to you.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Love you guys. See you.
Well, right now we're going to get on out of here while they're bouncing on over there. We're going to play this whole thing. But yeah, I do think that you are probably not going to see the end of COVID anytime soon. I think it's stuck with us just like the flu and other things. It'll just be new variations, and it'll probably
forever.
be forever. Past my lifetime, past yours. I hate to say it, probably past my nephews, and they're 13 and 14.
My grandson is going to deal with it. So, yeah,
exactly. On that note, we're going to get out of here, and hopefully David didn't get too sad hearing our comments about that, since he's still watching over there on LinkedIn probably. But we'll be back tomorrow, and like I said, hopefully our good friend Steve will be back from New York, and he can tell us about how New York is doing and all of that. But if not, we'll make it roll either way, the way we always do. Always glad to have these conversations with you, Chris, and we're out of here.
See you, Mark.